Welcome to Car Coach Reports. This is 4-Minute Friday for the week ending August 10th, 2018. I'm Lauren Fix, and this is what's going on in your automotive world. Frozen fuel economy set a good example. Zipper merge, another EV tax credit falling, and automotive history. Stay right with us. We're here on location in Jackson, Wyoming. We'll be driving the Chevy Silverado truck, so you can look for our full his turn, her turn review on our channel. Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Frozen fuel economy numbers. President Trump and the EPA have frozen the EPA or CAFE standards, which is corporate average fuel economy, which is the fuel economy average of the vehicles that are sold. If manufacturers don't make that number, they pay a fine. And you as consumers, of course, would like more fuel economy. But why is this a good thing? Because it's actually going to be better for the economy that they freeze these fuel economy standards, and it's better for your safety. Why is that? In order to meet the 55 mile per gallon standard that President Obama had put into place before he left office, that would mean vehicles would have to be lighter. Manufacturers would pay additional fines because they couldn't make that, and that makes cars more expensive. So people don't think of it that way. They think, well, they can make them at 55 miles a gallon. Sure they can. You could buy a Prius or some other vehicle that does get 55 miles to the gallon. But to get a corporate average fuel economy, that's all your vehicles across the lineup, divided by how many vehicles you sell, that could be difficult, because right now your average is somewhere around 25 to 30 miles to the gallon, depending upon the manufacturer. Because of that, manufacturers pay a fine. That fine is passed along to you in the price. Now, in order to make manufacturers' vehicles get those fuel economy numbers, they need to make them smaller and they need to make them lighter. Some of the materials are very expensive, so you're paying more for the vehicle, but it's also lighter, which means it's more dangerous. If you look at some of the Department of Transportation numbers, you'll see that smaller vehicles have higher incidence of death in an accident versus a larger vehicle, which is probably why SUVs are very popular, and you've noticed a drop in car sales and an increase in SUV and truck sales because people would like to have safe vehicles for their families. And we're in America, we drive long distances and we don't have charging stations. And that's why all this has suddenly come up, because electric vehicles need charging stations, and that's great if you're on the coast, but if you're in the bulk of the country, such as here in Jackson, Wyoming, I haven't seen any charging stations. At the hotel we're staying at, there are no charging stations. And if you drive up in a Tesla or anything that is a plug-in, you're kind of in trouble. So this is the problem. Until there's an infrastructure, it doesn't make sense. But then we've got this other factor. The materials used in the batteries are cobalt in a product I've discussed before called neodymium. And because there's a shortage of both of these rare earth minerals, the price goes up, which causes the price of batteries to go up, which means the price of plug-ins get more expensive. So at some point, it's not going to make any sense that it makes more sense for you as a consumer to pick what you want. So the Trump administration realizes this, and what they're doing is they're freezing the corporate average fuel economy for an additional 10 years. At 34 miles to the gallon. And there will be some fines for some manufacturers that don't meet that number, but most of them will be able to do that. Very interesting. So as we watch this, we'll keep you posted, but I'll tell you one thing, you want to freeze those fuel economy numbers because you don't want to pay more for a car and you don't want to be forced to buy an electric vehicle. If you want one, go get it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Number 2, set a good example. Liberty Mutual just did a study and found that 1/3 of parents don't follow the rules they enforce on their new drivers. For example, wear a seatbelt, don't have the radio so loud, and please don't text and drive. Well, they're finding that 37% of parents have set a horrible example because they're texting and driving. Additionally, they found that when they do impose a punishment, they don't enforce it because they find it inconvenient. Now, I will tell you that I had rules with my kids, and they'll tell you I enforce them. You need to enforce these rules, and you also need to set an example if you want the roads to be safer. So Liberty Mutual is pushing parents to try to enforce those rules and regulations. We are all doing that as well. I think there's no reason you wouldn't want to enforce the rules. Remember, yeah, it may be inconvenient, but choice B could be bad. If your kids have an accident, a serious accident, you got a bigger problem. So set the example, don't text and drive, don't crank the radio, and of course, always wear your seatbelt and pay attention to the road. Number 3, zipper merge. Now, if you've never heard of a zipper merge, I will explain it to you. This happens in construction zones. It goes from 2 lanes down to 1 for whatever reason, and you're supposed to alternate, sort of like in kindergarten. It's your turn, it's my turn, back and forth, right? Well, people don't seem to understand that. Instantly when they see the road is going to narrow, they all jump into the right lane, and then there's always some yo-yo who goes flying down the high-speed lane and tries to jam himself into the line. What's really supposed to happen is you're supposed to stay in your lane, and when you get close to the narrowing area, you take turns and alternate, and that would cause traffic to speed along. Well, apparently that's not happening because no one was taught that, because what they teach you in driver's ed these days is to pass the test. And what we want you to do is to teach your kids and remember what a zipper merge is. If you don't remember what that is, look it up online. There's tons of really cool videos. Very simple, take turns. So that's going to happen a lot with construction, so remind your new drivers and yourself, zipper merge, please. Number 4, federal tax credits are going away with another brand. We've talked in the past about Tesla selling 200,000 vehicles, therefore that federal tax credit starts cutting itself in half. Well, GM is very close with 186,000 vehicles. That included the Volt and the Bolt and other electric vehicles. And once they reach that 200,000 vehicle limit, their tax credit will also start cutting in half and eventually be gone. They're expected to meet that number by the end of the year. So if you're thinking about buying a Bolt EV, which is a very reasonably priced vehicle, or a Volt that they're not going to be making after this next gen, at least that's what we've been told, now is probably a good time to buy one. Also keep in mind that General Motors is petitioning to try to extend that $7,500 tax credit, but I don't think the Trump administration is going to go for it. If you bought an EV, I'm curious, did you get the tax credit? How much of the tax credit? And if you didn't buy one and you really don't care about the tax credit, I'm kind of curious what your input is on that as well. I think that's the only reason they're selling. Give me $7,500 off and we might be talking. Of course, your state has additional tax credits as well. And finally, this week in automotive history. In 1944, Volkswagen halted production of their Type 1 people's car. We all know what that looks like. But why would they do that? Because it was during the war. AKA the Beetle was under threat by Allied bombers. During World War II, the German army needed lightweight utility vehicles to take precedent over production of passenger cars. So they changed production to the Type 62 Kobo wagon, and it was put into high gear. This vehicle was utilized Beetle chassis, and it featured 4 doors and 18-inch wheels, which was quite unusual for that time period. Though production of the KDF Stat factory was dedicated primarily to the Kobo wagon and the amphibious counterpart, which is kind of cool, the Schwimm wagon. Yes, I didn't make that up, the Schwimm wagon. The factory did produce Beetles from 1941 to August 7th, 1944. Following the war, Beetles went back into production in 1945, and by 1949, VW was back in the hands of Germany. This is what's going on in your automotive world. Make sure to look out for our Chevy Silverado pickup truck review with my co-host Paul Bryan on our His Turn, Her Turn channel. And of course, sign up for that Car Coach Reports at laurenfix.com. If you like this video, make sure to like and share and subscribe. Hit that little bell next to it so you know every time we put up another 4-Minute Friday Car Coach Reports or His Turn, Her Turn review. And if you really like our channel and you totally love us, we appreciate your support on our Patreon page. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. I hope you're laughing, Paul.